Chelsea, the Reading Outlaw, here to do finally my Genrethon wrap-up. It also is like my so far April wrap-up, so I will probably do another short wrap-up at the end of the month. This is everything I've read since I finished A Little Life, which if you have watched that review, you will understand why. If not, I will put it in one of the title cards up here, and you can go watch it if you're interested, because that book gave me feelings. Most of them were bad. Alright, so I'm here to do my wrap-up of Genrethon. Genrethon ran from the 10th through the 17th of April, and the goal was to read at least 3 books in 3 different genres. I actually read 6 books in 5 different genres. Technically 6 if you separate out the 2 different kinds of nonfiction that I read, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say nonfiction and kind of cover it all. So going through what I read, just in the order that I read it, the first thing that I finished was Perfect Days by Rafael Montes. This was a thriller recommended to me by Joss over at Squibbles Reads. Here's the cover. Very creepy pink suitcase. If you've read or if you read the book, you will understand why it's so creepy. It is about Teo, and Teo becomes absolutely obsessed with a girl that he meets at a party. And when he learns that she is planning on taking a little bit of a writer's retreat, she's a screenwriter, he decides that he is going to kidnap her and go with her and take her on a road trip and do lots of other very creepy things. This is one of those books very similar to You by Carolyn Kepnes, in that we are inside the mind of the person who is so creepy, as opposed to being in the perspective of the victim or being in this kind of removed third person perspective. So if that is something that bothers you or something you don't think you can handle, I would probably recommend skipping this book. Otherwise, I thoroughly enjoyed it, although I found the ending to be incredibly problematic. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. If you've read it, let me know down below. We can chat about some of the details of what happens and the ending and why I found it so problematic, but it is definitely one of those incredibly interesting kind of views into the mind of somebody who is clearly disturbed on a number of levels. Shortly after that, I finished up the ebook of Holly Madison's memoir, Down the Rabbit Hole. This is her story of growing up in Alaska and moving to Los Angeles and becoming a girlfriend to Hugh Hefner, basically, and how she kind of moves through the ranks of new girl in the mansion up to being Hef's main girlfriend. And then she talks about filming The Girls Next Door, obviously. She talks about Bridget and Kendra and her relationship with them and how her relationship with Hef ended. And she gets into her relationships after the Playboy Mansion. It was good. It was not the best written thing that I've ever read, but I definitely enjoyed seeing kind of a behind the scenes into the Playboy Mansion. Definitely love the shade that she threw at Kendra. Kendra was always my least favorite girl of all the girls next door. So it was very entertaining to read those more salacious bits. Definitely found that entertaining. It got like a solid 3 stars for me. Just kind of your standard enjoyable but nothing special celebrity memoir. Then after that, I finished Under the Banner of Heaven, The Story of a Violent Faith by Jon Krakauer. I listened to this on audio. I'm slowly working my way on audio through all of Jon Krakauer's books because I read or listened to Missoula on audio in 2015 and was enamored. I think he writes the kind of nonfiction that lends itself really well to audio. So I decided that this would be the next one I picked up. You guys know how I feel about fringe religions. The FLDS branch of the Mormon Church is no exception, and in fact is usually the rule. I will say I did not enjoy this book as much as I was hoping to or thought that I would. I felt as though the middle got really bogged down in the politics and in the travel of Joseph Smith and the early Mormons from east to west, how that worked, why there are such large Mormon populations in certain areas of Mexico and Canada. And while it was very interesting, I was much more involved in the story of an FLDS man who's convinced he's told by God to commit murder. That's kind of the entry lens through which we get to the rest of the story. And I was much more interested in that story than I was in some of the deeper and more detailed historical roots of the FLDS faith. So on the whole, it was another 3-star read. I really enjoyed listening to it on audio. I would highly recommend picking it up. I also think it's a really good introduction to Mormonism and the FLDS Church and where the two diverge and how the two started. It's a very good historical overview, but having done a bunch of reading kind of in this area, it was not anything that was new to me. But if it's something that you are unfamiliar with or have not read before, this would probably be a really good place to start. And then after that, I just got into some other things, some not necessarily easier reads, but some books that were shorter, very easy to blast through, one of which was Quarter Life Poetry, Poems for the Young, Broke, and Hangry by Samantha Jane. I was not crazy about this book. I ended up giving it 2 stars. It literally took me like 45 minutes to read because this is all that it is like an illustration and a little rhyming couplet. So there were a couple that I flagged. I really, really liked this one. It comes from the sex section. The book itself is actually broken into a couple different sections. There's sex, personal life, food, work, that kind of thing. And the one that I really liked from this category said, he texted, "What you wearing?" I gave myself a glance, a cat-themed extra large sweatshirt, and some wine-stained stretchy pants. Which, that is the story of my life and the story of the lives of a lot of ladies that I know. So there were some little bits like that in here, but on the whole, I just didn't think it was anything special. Not very many stood out to me. Out of maybe the 150, 200 little poems in this book, I only flagged 5 or 6, which is not the best ratio. So something to look up if poetry is not really your thing. It would make a good gift, but was not crazy about it. Then after that, I picked up a graphic novel that I've unfortunately already had to return to the library, so I don't have a physical copy to show you. That is The Kitchen by Ollie Masters. This is a story about 3 women who live in Hell's Kitchen in the 1970s. Hell's Kitchen is a neighborhood in New York City, and they are married to 3 Irish mob bosses. And when those 3 mob bosses go to jail, they decide to kind of step up and fill the shoes of their husbands without their husband's permission, which leads to some complications down the road. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I was not the biggest fan of the art style, but I really liked the stories. This is badass gangster ladies. This is taking on made men and making backdoor deals and working with the Italian mob. It is Goodfellas with vaginas. It is Reservoir Dogs without all the dudes. It is prime. I really enjoyed it. The only caveat that I had is because it takes place in Hell's Kitchen with the Irish Mafia, a lot of the names sounded the same. There was a Tommy, a Timmy, a Jimmy, a Bobby, a Robbie, and it just, kind of got a little bit hard to tell them apart, which is where my critique of the art came in. The art style didn't differentiate enough between them that I found myself kind of having to go back and check who is who's married to who, what's going on with all of that. But if you're looking for a lady empowerment, kick-ass women's story and you don't mind a little bit of violence and, gang life thrown in there, definitely one that I would check out. And then I rounded out the week with probably one of the best graphic novels that I have read since I read the first volume of The Wicked and the Divine. And that is Sunstone, Volume 1 by Stjepan Sejic. There's his name. It's Eastern European and I butchered it, I'm sure. This is a lesbian BDSM erotica. I'm trying to find a page I can... Here's like a decent page where not necessarily the most crazy things are happening. I don't think there are any boobs. No boobs on this page. Always good to check, but no boobs on this page, and it will give you kind of an idea. This is wonderful, not just because of how beautiful it's drawn and not just because of how well formed the characters are, but because it provides an excellent introduction to BDSM culture, clears up some of the misgivings about being either a dominant or a submissive, and overcoming some of those social hurdles that can come when you do participate in a kink community. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I have volumes 2, 3, and 4 on hold at the library, and I cannot wait to get a hold of them. This was originally recommended to me by Caitlin over at Kitty G, and I put off picking it up for a while for some reason, and I'm kind of not glad that I did, but it just meant that I, got to experience the joy of this for even longer. If nudity is not your thing, if non-vanilla, non-cishet sex is not your thing, definitely steer clear of this one. But if you have questions about the BDSM community, or if you're curious about the BDSM community, or you just want a really powerful love story between 2 women that's also incredibly well drawn, this is definitely the thing you need to pick up. It's not something I can recommend to everyone, but to everyone I feel I can recommend it to, I have been just shoving it in their faces, being like, please read this thing so that we can talk about it. We have 1 poetry book, 1 thriller, 1 erotica, 2 nonfiction, and 1 like crime noir gangster novel, which I'm making its own genre for the purpose of this film. And that about wraps up my Genrethon. This video is officially much longer than I wanted it to be, but I've enjoyed talking to you guys and wrapping everything up so far for the month of April, as well as for Genrethon. Thank you so much to Kristen and Lauren and Brittany and Joss for putting on such an amazing, amazing readathon. I will link to their wrap-up live show down below, where they all get together and talked about what they read. It ran about an hour, and it's definitely worth checking out if you have the time. Otherwise, feel free to comment if you've read any of these. Hit me up on Twitter, look me up on Instagram, let me know on Goodreads. I am always here all over the internet to talk books. Happy reading, guys. Bye.